Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Howden. I'm the director of the Climate Change Institute here at ANU, and I'd like to welcome you to the first of the staff and student engagement for the ANU Below Zero Emissions program. So today we're covering energy and buildings, and we've got a program which includes three speakers, just to really thought starters, and then followed by a discussion. But before we start, we've got a short video which has an introduction from Paul Duldig, our Chief Operating Officer here at ANU. Over to you, Juliet.
Hi, I'm Paul Duldig, Chief Operating Officer at the Australian National University. I'd like to welcome you to the ANU Below Zero consultation. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land where I am today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. As we are all too aware, after the unprecedented bushfires, air pollution and heat that affected much of our east coast last summer, and with fire now wreaking havoc up and down the west coast of the US, climate change is already having devastating impacts all over the world. As a world leader in many areas of climate and energy research, ANU hosts over 450 climate and energy researchers and runs over 130 climate and energy-related courses across the university. Our research and education programs are leading the way in developing solutions to the challenges that climate change presents. As the national university, ANU has also a responsibility to lead the nation in line with the world's best practice on greenhouse gas emissions reduction. However, at the moment, ANU activities are contributing to climate change through the direct and indirect emission of significant quantities of greenhouse gases. Further to this, simply reducing our emissions to net zero is no longer enough to maintain a safe and stable climate. To keep global temperature rises to well below 2 degrees Celsius, and if possible to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we'll also need to draw down and store or use greenhouse gases. In February, the ANU Council passed a resolution recognising the urgency of action required to address climate change. They also committed us to reducing the university's greenhouse gas footprint to below zero through its own operations. The resulting ANU Below Zero initiative is a vital strategic priority for ANU. It is a strong demonstration of our integrity, our emphasis on societal transformation, and our commitment to excellence in everything we do. With the university's extremely difficult financial situation, this consultation process is taking place at a very challenging time. Despite the stress that ANU is under, I'm proud that we are not shying away from developing this initiative. After all, we'll be dealing with the impacts of climate change long after COVID has passed. But there's no doubt that COVID-19 and our financial situation makes the operating environment for this initiative more difficult. Transitioning the university to below zero emissions is no small task. We'll need to look at every aspect of the way that we operate. We'll need to reconsider everything from how we integrate greenhouse gas implications into our decision-making, to how we use energy, how we travel, what we buy, and what we eat. That's why I'm calling on all of you to engage with this vital mission. Here at ANU, we have an incredible brains trust. I encourage all of you to contribute your ideas based on your personal perspectives, as well as your research and professional expertise, to help us transition to become a below zero emissions university as rapidly as possible. I look forward to your contributions soon. Thank you.
Okay, and thanks to Paul for that pre-recorded introduction. So thanks again, everyone, for joining in this morning. And because this is the first of 7 different engagement activities across the campus in terms of the Below Zero program. But before I start, I'd just like to also give an acknowledgement to country and acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on who we meet here at ANU. That's the Ngunnawal people. To pay my respects to the elders past and present. So what we're doing here is a series of 7 workshops, which are each of which has a small sort of set of thought leading or thought starter type presentations, followed by a moderated discussion. We've seen the etiquette rules, which we've put up before the start of the session here, and I'll go through those again. But what we're trying to do is not to is really just a way of bringing out ideas about how we can start this journey at ANU. So what we're looking at here is the sort of a live interaction, but we can also use the idea note program that you've got the link for to put up ideas and to start fleshing out some of those ideas. And so we'd encourage you to do that as well. So what we do though is first we hear from the speakers today. So we've got 3 speakers. There's Nicki Middleton from Facilities and Services, Ken Baldwin from Energy Change Institute, and also we've got Jess Catling, who's a student here at the Masters for Energy Change. And first up is Nicki. And so I don't want to give a long bio because we haven't got much time, but Nicki Middleton's Director of Facilities and Services, and obviously facilities and services are crucial in terms of going down this change pathway. Over to you, Nicki.
Thanks very much, Mark. And I also have a number of my own team just sort of sitting in the room behind me today. And also on the line, Mark and Mohan, who are part of my asset and engineering technical services team as well, who without notice, I might draw on them to provide some engagement along the way. So just very briefly, if everyone who is on the line today is not aware, late last year, we released the Acton Campus Master Plan. You can find it available online, but we might drop in the links as well so people can find it later. So we have quite a detailed, if everyone can see here, a very detailed master plan, which is really to set the strategic planning for the Acton campus over the next 20 years. So it's an evolving process that will happen over time. Supporting the main master plan, we have a series of frameworks. So we have some design guidelines, which will really try and get some consistency into the way that we build all our future works across the campus. We have a heritage framework that will actually make sure that we abide by our regulatory obligations in the heritage space. And most importantly, what's relevant for today is the energy management strategy, which is this document here. And that sets out some really key topics that we want to achieve over the next really 5 to 10 years. Now, things in this space move very, very quickly. And so I look at it as more the overarching guidelines. And the next piece of work that we need to do over the next 12 months is really, how do we want to implement it? And this is where today I'd really value the feedback from everyone here and some ideas and concepts to reduce our energy in buildings, but even the way that we might structure some of those processes into the future. There's some key pieces of work that we have underway. The team are working on an energy dashboard. We hope by the end of the year to have this implemented. And this is where we'll be able to monitor in real time the energy consumption use in each building. So we know where the high energy users are, where we could make some savings, or where we can sort of adjust settings and so forth to, in some ways, get those quick wins on our energy efficiency in buildings. We're also working strongly towards the central energy hubs as well. We have a couple already on campus. There is another one being planned for in the new student accommodation 8 complex, just over next to Bergman College. And any of our feasibility planning that is being undertaken for larger works, such as potentially consolidating the School of Health and Medicine buildings. They're also factoring central energy hubs into those buildings as well. So that's really sort of just a snapshot at the moment, conscious of time and making sure we've got enough for everyone. But I'll hand back over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Nicki, and really good to hear about those things there. So next, I think we'll just run with that order that we had previously. Ken, I think you're on next. Ken Baldwin is the Director of the Energy Change Institute here at ANU.
Good, thanks very much, Mark, and thank you, Nicki. As you know, we've been looking at energy related issues in buildings for a long time here on campus. I've worked with Nicki and her predecessors over many years. So it was a partnership between the Energy Change Institute and the Facilities and Services Division, which ended up producing the energy management strategy Nicki's referred to in the university's master plan. But this is just a sort of starting point, I think, and as Nicki says, lays out a framework. What we're looking for from you today is some new ideas that can contribute to this, and indeed, additional contributions to existing ideas. So we're really after your expertise to contribute as discipline area experts in the energy space, or as interested parties who have a general interest in helping the ANU meet its below zero emissions goals. So I would say that this is a great opportunity for ANU staff members to contribute to the goal of reducing our energy requirements and our emissions in buildings, to help us move forward with designing new buildings so that they meet even higher standards and specifications than we have in our existing building stock. And also from a research perspective. So we believe this should be a research-led process, that people with expertise in this area could design projects that can contribute to not only the below zero emissions objective, but also to the research that they are undertaking in energy related areas. So for example, we could envisage that the massive data sets that are available to us from facilities and services could be used to develop new management processes for our energy systems. We could envisage that there might be opportunities for prototyping new facilities as part of our energy infrastructure, whether this is related to prospects for hydrogen fuel cells, or whether it's for sophisticated computer software to manage our loads, et cetera, et cetera. So there are all sorts of opportunities where we can embed research into this program, where we can draw on your expertise and your interests in the energy and building space. So really this is an enormous opportunity for ANU staff to contribute to our below zero emissions goals going forward.
Thanks, Ken, and good to hear about the what you see as some of the opportunities. And as you're pointing out, it was always the intention to integrate the research and training component within the operational changes that Nicki introduced just before. So the last of our three initial speakers is Jess Catling, who's a student, Masters of Energy Change, and of course the students outnumber everyone else on the campus. Well, they would in normal times anyway. So absolutely crucial to get their voice here. Welcome, Jess.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, so I'm Jess. I've prepared a very short presentation as well, which I'll just see if I can share at the same time. Can everyone see that? Yep, working, great. Yep, so I'm good. Jess, I'm a Masters of Energy Change student, but I also spent a year working in Climate Active, which is a carbon neutral certification scheme run out of a federal government department. So I do have a little bit of insight into carbon neutral claims. So just in case anyone needs a refresher, the first step in a carbon neutral claim is measuring emissions, and then reducing these emissions as much as possible through investing in new cleaner technologies or by changing the way that the ANU operates. And then any remaining emissions can then be offset. So it all sounds pretty straightforward, but there's actually quite a few different frameworks for carbon neutrality as well as carbon accounting, which can make it quite complex. But across all of these five carbon accounting principles are pretty much the same. And so together, these principles add to the integrity and credibility of any claims, in particular, transparency. So allowing the public to understand how a carbon account was measured, and then to see what the activities are that ANU has done to reduce emissions, or the types of offsets that ANU is purchasing, sort of reduces that public skepticism, and it can encourage herd behaviour as well from other similar institutions if they can see how the ANU's gone about reaching carbon neutrality. So the next step in a carbon neutral claim is, let's go back, is working out the emission boundary. So what emission sources should be included, what sources are too hard to quantify, what can be justifiably excluded from the emission boundary. And so this diagram here is just an example of what some building emission boundaries might look like. But before anything can be ruled out or excluded, it's up to the ANU to sort of justify why these things could be excluded. So for example, embodied emissions in the buildings and building materials, these can be really hard to quantify, but perhaps in any new buildings that are going into the ANU, it might be easier to be able to capture that data and to look for low carbon alternatives for buildings. Similarly, for office furniture, it can be really tedious to go around and try and calculate the embodied emissions of all of the furniture in the buildings, but perhaps going forward from now, that's something that the ANU can capture. Here's an overview of the ANU's emissions. And so you can see that the largest emission source is Scope 1, which is direct emissions. And predominantly that would be gas, but can be some refrigerants as well. Although that might look a bit scary, it's actually pretty good for ANU to have such a large percentage of their emissions coming from Scope 1, because it means it's within their direct control. So with Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions, it means that those emissions are being released outside of ANU's direct control. So means there's opportunity there. A common thing with carbon neutral claims is there's a bit of a trade-off between emission reduction actions or offsetting. So offsetting can be cheaper and easier in reaching carbon neutrality, but there's also a lot of skepticism about the integrity of the units. So ANU would have to be careful about what sort of units they're looking to purchase for those emissions that they can't reduce. There's also a lot of uncertainty at the moment in offset markets with the CDM mechanism winding down. So moving forward, what units would ANU be looking to purchase and through what sort of offset schemes, and also choosing offsets which best fit ANU's commitment, because each offset is different. So perhaps the ANU would be more interested in offsets in a particular area that sort of fit with the way that ANU wants their story to be told. Alternatively, there's the cost of emission reduction action. So it can be very expensive to replace gas boilers with electric boilers or other equipment that's gas used, especially if it's been newly purchased. Perhaps that equipment still has 10 years or so left before it's ready to be replaced. So does the ANU want to replace that equipment that's not at end of life? But in doing so, there's an opportunity there to leverage the ACT's 100% renewable electricity. So that could be an easy win there. But anyway, that's just a few questions for ANU moving forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Jess. So it's good to see your sort of expertise in that area coming through to this application here in ANU. So what we're just going to do now is have a discussion process where people can raise ideas. And remember, the idea here is to build up the pool of ideas and information here. It's not so much to critique others, so aim to build and create rather than to sort of critique. So how we're going to run this, if you just put your raised hands in the participants process in Zoom, so you just click on that, and then we'll ask each person to speak up. Obviously, if you can keep your comments and questions concise, so that we can actually move through the full range of people who might want to speak, that would be very helpful. And always remember that you can also put your ideas up on Idea Note so other people can look at them, dissect them, like them, critique them, add to them, etc. So that way we actually build something a little bit bigger. So just to kick off, I've got a question, I think, from Michael Thomas from the Battery Storage and Grid Integration Program. Michael, if you can have a say.
Hi there. I'm Michael Thomas from the Battery Storage and Grid Integration Program. Thank you for this wonderful forum. It's a great idea, and I think the initiative is a great idea. I just wanted to make a couple of points. I think the first one was that the idea of having an energy audit is really important to get an idea of where we're starting from. And there seems to be already quite a bit of progress made in that, so that's really wonderful. I think the second point I wanted to make was that monitoring the progress that we do make is also extremely important in terms of being able to track our progress, keep ourselves honest when we're not doing so well, but also to congratulate ourselves when we do make good progress. So it's really encouraging to see that the energy dashboard is almost up and going there. So that's really great. I think my question is, or my statement would be that we need to sort of stringently define what we mean by negative emissions, let's say. So the ACT is, the ANU is carbon neutral in terms of energy consumption already as part of being in the ACT. But that sort of means the energy that the ANU consumes over the course of the year is offset by energy produced by renewable resources over the course of a year. But in terms, the ANU is not carbon neutral in terms of power. So when you flick a light switch on at any given time, it may or may not be coming from a renewable resource. And so if that's something that we want to confront, and that's something the whole country will have to confront at some point, something like a microgrid backed by a battery or solar would go a long way to help that. And that can also be a massive research initiative and facility as well. And we can use that to do some groundbreaking research. Because I think we don't want to be making accounting tricks, using accounting tricks to reach this initiative. We want to keep ourselves to, what would you call it, like a very high stringent definition. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael, and we're certainly not interested in accounting tricks either, so your point's well made there. So next up, we've got Tom Worthington.
Okay, first of all, how's the audio? I'm using a jury rig setup here in Sydney. Excellent. I'm actually sitting on the balcony outside. Okay, I put something into the online thing about how if we integrate online learning better into the ANU experience, we can reduce energy use, also demolish the old lecture theatres which are no longer fit for purpose because we're not going to be giving lectures like that, and put in more flat floor classrooms like the Murray Ray Centre, which as a byproduct is more environmentally sustainable, including any energy reduction. The other point I just wanted to make was I put a link in the chat forum. One of my former students when I was teaching ICT sustainability at ANU works in this area in Canada, and I put a link to a paper he'd written. He's now at Alberta, he was previously at Athabasca, on a process for measuring energy use and carbon emissions at a university. And he was part of a North American syndicate of universities where they standardized how they did this. I suggest ANU should not go out on its own and try and do something that's better than everybody else. We need to work with other institutions so we have comparable figures. And the key, I think, is to change our teaching methods, because apart from energy reduction, we may well lose most of our international students due to geopolitical influences in the next few months. So we need to be ready to teach in another way, or we will be saving energy by shutting down the university if we don't have any students or money to teach or research. I'm sorry to sound a bit negative, but the main point is new teaching methods, new classrooms, reducing energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom, for the 3 suggestions you made there. Good. Next, Philip Taylor.
Yeah, thanks very much. Hi, everyone. I'm a postdoc up at RSAA, up at Mount Stromlo. I'm also the chair of the Sustainability Committee here, so I've got a few ideas that as a committee we've sort of come up with. So please stop me if I go on too long. So I think the first thing I just wanted to bring up was the ActuAGL Big Business Light Switch. And so this is an initiative ActuAGL are doing where they come in and they will replace your lights either for free or at heavily subsidized rates. They'll come in, give you a free quote, and they'll do all the swapping over as well for free. So I think that's something that we should be looking into, frankly. I've raised it with the school already, but there's only so much they can do with the current, you know, everything else that's going on in the world. And so it's not had too much inertia behind it, unfortunately. I've seen a lot of people mention it online already, but installing solar panels is like a super obvious thing that we can do. That's something we've also looked into here. And it seems, well, in any other circumstance, it would be quite an easy financial sell. But at the moment, we're having a bit more difficulty. We're trying to find other ways to finance this. Food waste is something else I wanted to bring up. So organic waste in landfill in Australia is actually Australia's 7th highest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, which isn't huge, but again, it's not negligible. And something really easy we found that we can do is just have food waste bins rather than it going to landfill. And that was something we just implemented really quickly, really cheaply. Again, it's not a huge impact, but it's better than nothing. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention was looking into double and triple glazing. Now, you might be able to tell I'm not from Australia. And so for me, having double glazing is kind of normal. Whereas over here, I see that it isn't so much. Single glazing is more common. But then we have this ridiculous situation sometimes up at Stromlo where we're running the heaters all winter because we have single glazing and it just gets drafts coming in the whole time. And it's just a huge waste of energy. Yeah, but I think those are the things I just wanted to touch on. So thank you.
Thanks, Philip, and your point's well made. And it came up, I think, in the ANU discussion with the Vice Chancellor some weeks ago, where one of the big buildings had actually been refitted, and it had been refitted with single glazed windows, and people were wondering why. So the next person is Igor.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's actually one of the serious stages of our discussion on energy and what we can do with energy and carbon reduction at ANU. And I can see, obviously, there are many suggestions, and the question is which one to address initially. I think first of all, we need to start separating topics. The topic we discussed today is building, not general, ANU in general. And if we cannot implement Tom's suggestions to move all teachings to online, we'll still have buildings and auditoriums. So we need to discuss, I suggest, focus this discussion on what we can do with buildings. And I briefly touch general approach and then go back to buildings. Generally, to address what's happening at ANU in energy terms, we probably need to start with creating an energy model of ANU. And there were several attempts, and none of them resulted in something that people can use and students can play with. So I think it's a major undertaking that we should be focusing By energy model, I mean a combined electricity and thermal model. So basically we have coming source of electricity, coming several fuels, gas, for example, with various energy intensity, and then something's happening at ANU to support all energy, all our activities, and for that we need energy. And building as such is a sink of energy. And when this energy model consider various options, the sink of energy is coming to building, and we obviously need to minimize energy in the building. Considering building as such, important issue been raised about single glaze windows. It's just ridiculous that we're still putting single glaze windows. And if we go to contractors and how the contracts are formed, the developers are working to probably find reasons why. It's probably cost and cost saving and easy cost saving and easy statement of cost saving. That's why. And as outlined or stipulated in our energy master plan, we need to just simply impose a standard at ANU. No new building will contain single glaze windows, full stop, or even no new building will contain double glaze windows and triple glaze windows, because it's obviously the first line of attack. But finally, how we can assess all the buildings? What's actually happened with the buildings? Some of them are old, some of them are well constructed, some of them not well constructed. I think it's a good activities to engage our researchers and our students for assessment of the building. For example, as stipulated again in our energy master plan, we can assess air leaks in each building, and that's a major component. Then we can do infrared assessment of the building and see which windows are most dangerous and where actually energy is leaking in winter, and address this issue first of all, and then step by step gets improvement of the building stock. So with the building, I suggested two major approaches. First is imposing strict standards of new buildings, such as, for example, no more single glaze windows, whatever. And the second is assessing existing stock from the point of view of efficient energy use, and that includes air leaks, infrared assessment, lighting assessment as mentioned today, and etc. etc. Thank you.
Thanks, Igor, for those sort of practical ideas there, and very interesting. So we've got Matt Stocks, and then when Matt's had made a comment, we'll just revisit some of those things which people have talked about and get some input and comments on those. So Matt.
So mine's partly a question, possibly, rather than a comment. It looks like there's lots of work went into the Energy Master Plan, which overlaps very solidly with the space we're talking about here. What is the process that we're thinking about in terms of combining, implementing, joining these together? Because I just look through the list and do lots and lots of nodding, and nodding that there's lots of really good ideas there and seem to be largely pointing us in the right direction in terms of thinking about managing our emissions from our building envelopes. What's the link between that and what we're doing today?
Okay, thanks, Matt. So we might actually get a comment on that from both Ken and Nicki. But one of the things here, I guess, is that there's a series of different strategies and plans which have been developed over a period of time, and Below Zero wants to essentially build on those rather than replace those. And so, as you point out, there was a lot of effort that went into the Energy Master Plan, and it very much takes us in the same direction as the Below Zero program, but Below Zero has additional elements that the Master Plan have as well. So Ken or Nicki, who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to go, Mark. So thank you, everyone. There's some really great feedback, and it's really quite heartening that a lot of those suggestions, I think, as I'll quote Igor, we can get some relatively quick wins. In some respects, I like to look at the positive of what COVID has done for us. It's actually done us a few favours in the way that we've been doing our capital planning and our work in the future. Yes, we don't have a lot of money to spend right now, but what it has enabled us to do is all our capital works, our future builds have now been put on pause, and we're actually revisiting completely the way that we undertake our future capital planning for new buildings. So for the next sort of 12 to 18 months, what we're doing is finishing off the existing builds underway. We're going to relook at making sure all our services are integrated properly, so we're not building to a budget or in piecemeal or whatever's the cheapest solution. And this is where we can really harness sort of the research side and looking at our new standards and actually putting it in as a proper process. So we're not trying to retrospectively update buildings at a later date. And as you said, double glaze may actually become the standard going forward. The old buildings is a really key one, and I know for Mark on the line and Doug and Mohan, who are just sitting beside me and behind me here in the room, it's a key focus on there as well. Our old buildings are not only not great at energy efficiency, but they cause us a hell of a lot of upkeep in maintenance and even a comfort factor for people who are occupying those areas. With my space team this afternoon, we've got a phased approach. We're going out to the general managers and service division directors this afternoon. We're asking everyone to do a first cut of a space audit for us to say what is actually being occupied and what isn't, particularly with some of the changes that have been announced recently. And then over the coming weeks, we're going to use what people's space requirements are against the old buildings and the new buildings. And so with the view is that potentially, if space allows, we can decommission some of those older buildings over the coming months, particularly the ones that are least energy efficient. Now that's the older buildings. I can't decommission the newer buildings for those that might not be energy efficient, but there's certainly some of the things that are underway that it goes towards what you're asking. The final one, I think, Matt, where you talk about how does the energy management strategy tie in with a lot of these discussions. It's a really good point, and it's something Ken, Mark and I have been talking about recently, is how can we bring it all together and be transparent on those, the status of where we're up to and the reporting and so forth. So I might throw to Ken to see whether you wanted to contribute now further on that one.
Yes, great. Thanks, Nicki. Nice segue. So one of the things, of course, under the current circumstances we have to worry about is money. And as it turns out, saving money aligns with a lot of the energy management strategy proposals that we have in the pipeline. And so anything to do with energy efficiency, anything to do with reduction in energy costs is front and center of our attention at the moment. So what we've done is we prepared a list. It's a bit like one of these charts that you see with you know, the cost benefit of a particular measure going from negative, which means you actually save money, to positive, which means you have to spend money. And so we're building a set of priorities around measures that not only are moving us in the right direction as far as emissions are concerned, but are actually going to save us money. And so those will be the first cabs off the rank, and others will follow. But as Paul Duldig said at the very beginning, we're not walking away from this process just because it might cost us money. It actually won't cost us money in the long term. If you look at many of these measures, they will save money in the long term, not just this year or next year, which is where the big crunch is at the university at the moment. It'll save us money in 2030 and 2040 and 2050. So if we build the buildings correctly, they will last a long time. And if we build in the correct measures for energy saving and for emissions reduction, that will also last a long time and will pay itself back in spades over a long time. So I think we're all on the same page here. Maybe I'll take the chance then to move on to talk about specifically some of these issues. So I'm just remembering back to what people said this morning, but first of all, there was a discussion, I think from Philip Taylor, around solar panels on roofs. In many cases, you know, this will save us money over the long term. We know that on the domestic side of things, as a consumer, that you'll pay back your investment in solar over 4 years. That may not be as rapid in a university context if you're talking about existing roofs, because they're more difficult to access, they're higher up, they've got other stuff on them, et cetera, et cetera. So the payback time may not be as quick. but it certainly will be on a time frame which is much, much less than the lifetime of the building, and it'll certainly be on a decadal time frame. So certainly we need to look at those sorts of investments, and there are different models for doing that. It may actually be better to use a greenfield site and have a power purchase agreement than it is to stick solar panels on every bit of real estate on campus. But we'll look at all those and come to some view as to what might be best. There might be a great opportunity for standalone sites. For example, at Kaialoa, the coastal station, to have a standalone solar site there. So, it just depends on the individual circumstance. When it comes to overall energy use, let me come back to Michael Thomas's comment. I think what Michael was talking about was electricity, not energy. So let me make a point that we actually use a lot of energy that is not electricity. So the ACT government giving us 100% renewable electricity for free, as it were, doesn't apply to things like gas consumption. So we really need to look very carefully at our gas consumption on campus and our other fuel consumption, whether it be diesel from diesel gen sets that we have around the place, particularly for backup. Should we be using hydrogen fuel cells, et cetera, et cetera? So these are important elements to take into consideration. And actually, I've got an interesting question for Michael Thomas as well, which relates to his discussion around the fact that, maybe at a particular time you turn the light on and although the ACT has contracted 100% renewable energy over time, that maybe turning on the light switch actually draws on coal-based electricity generation. Well, on average over a year, by and large, if you do the averaging process in the proper way, the ACT 100% renewable energy contracts do cover all of those circumstances on average. But I think, Michael, you've actually raised a good point. If you have a very big load source, whether, I don't know, it might be a massive industrial plant or something like that, and you don't follow these sort of averages, you could indeed, by turning it on at a particular time and do this repeatedly, produce more emissions than on average you would save over a year. So maybe we ought to look at how this works for the university. I think probably because the university has has residential, it has office, it has large unconventional electricity sources. We kind of look like the rest of the ACT pretty much anyway. But maybe we don't in some circumstances. Maybe we should be just very carefully looking to see whether we get outside this. But I would say, by and large, this is a very small contribution to our emissions. But anyway, thanks for the idea. That was interesting, and thanks everybody else for your ideas. LED replacement, I heard also being mentioned. So again, something that facilities and services have looked at. They've actually done some elements of this already, and indeed, if we could get somebody else to do it and pay nothing for it, that'd be wonderful. I'm not sure that our option is available to us, however, at ANU. So, but it is part of the energy management strategy.
Thanks, Ken. John, you've got your hand up. Is it to sort of comment on things that have been raised, or is this a new point?
Thanks, Mark. I guess I just wanted to touch on one or two of the ideas that I had to put forward, and I can do that just very briefly. I wanted to I think there's a lot to be gained from driving public awareness of our, or not public, but university awareness of our energy use. And I think we could do some really positive things like ensuring that buildings users can immediately access the energy use associated with their building. I mean, there may be sort of policy and there may be all sorts of security considerations of those things, I don't know. But in general, I think, most of our buildings are just office buildings. And if people walking into the foyer can see what the building energy use is doing today versus last week, then it'll just give those extra incentives to turn the lights out or turn off the computer monitor or whatever it is. And it'll also sort of drive a local tendency to ask questions, why do we use all that energy on our hot water system or something? I think that could be a really positive way to ensure that we keep pushing through changes. oh, my apologies, sorry. So that could be displays in the foyer, that could be just a website, that sort of thing. I think that could really help to keep this whole thing moving forward. That was a flavour of the suggestions that I had there.
Thanks, John. And it's probably before my time, but I actually think that at some stage there were sort of screens in foyers showing energy use, etc. But that's been and gone. I think
I'm not aware of that in the time I've been here, but I am aware that a lot of investment's been made in the BMS, the building management system, across ANU, and I've been told it's really world class. And I reckon there'd be scope for computer science and engineering or others to sort of maybe hook up the final chain, piece of the chain, and get that information to users in a way that's hopefully sustainable.
So I can comment on that, and maybe Nicki can too. So before Nicki's time, we, as Mark mentioned, did indeed have a dashboard system where people could walk into the foyer of their building and see exactly what was happening. It wasn't implemented in every building, but only some, and there were some issues with it. So it was, I think, pulled down to fix those issues, and then things overtook it. But it's still a part of the energy management strategy. Nicki, do you want to say something?
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, I wasn't aware of a lot of that one, so it was good to pick up on the history for there. I'm just wondering, so with the BMS, we are actually our building management system, we're actually going out to market late next year for a new system as well. So I think that the data that the team has is brilliant, but the underlying system does need a big upgrade and an improvement. But I think some of these ideas that have come out today, and as we continue over the coming months, we could roll that into the new process as well. Displaying information, I just saw a comment pop up to say that the screens were turned off to save energy as well on displaying it in the buildings. Perhaps there's a way that, I don't know, a monthly target that we could pop on the website for people's, information from there might be something reasonable. I'll need to take that on board and chat to the team a little bit further though to see what we could do there.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that that we used to have those panels displays in the building, especially on student campuses, and that used to display for each floor. It was a competition between floors, but I don't think why, so it all disappeared, right? Probably didn't work properly, or we selected the wrong provider of the panels. But that's actually a very efficient measure.
Marwan's just got something to add as well.
I just want to add on this energy management strategy, talks about moving away from gas. One of the issues we have is capital cost, as you mentioned, that the capital cost in terms of going away from gas boilers to heat pump or heat recovery chillers. One other things we are looking at, it can we use the waste heat directly for heating. That's one of the things I think we should look at in future. Like a 40-degree water can be used for floor heating. So in particularly the NCI is rejecting substantial heat, which could be used for the accommodations or something like that in future.
Thanks, Marwan. That's good. And so, Igor, the gamification aspect of that, so we have people competing to reduce energy fastest is of course something quite attractive, and I suspect will come up this week as part of the hackathon that we're doing with Tiger Spike and Microsoft. To develop some ideas about what can be done on campus. And that comes to that point that Reza was making before about behaviour and how behaviour is really important. And we do have a separate engagement process like this specifically on behaviours. But one note here is that in our recent survey of people across ANU about where should responsibility lie between individual behaviour versus corporate policies and corporate responsibility, and it pretty much ended up down the middle, and people were saying it's actually a shared responsibility. So it's partly about the individual, but it's partly about the institution setting appropriate policies and activities, and so that will be an interesting point to raise later. But that gamification does actually start to bring those things together a little bit. So at the moment, we haven't got any other hands up. But are there any other comments that people make? So far we've had a broad range of perspectives and plenty of feedstock to work on and to look at.
Probably just one or two, if I can, Mark. I think it was Philip who raised the food waste bins up at Stromlo. It's something that was I sort of referred to before we hit disaster central of all the incidents the last 6 months. I started to ask the team those very same questions. The residential halls on campus, there's a lot of food waste there because there are a lot of catered facilities. And so we've been looking at something that there's a lot of discussions, I think, with the ACT government as well about what solutions we can put in place for the volume. Some offices are quite small and you'd think the volume is small because you see a big bin, but when we're looking at a whole of campus, it's quite a large lot of waste, which is not great either. So that's something we've got to look at, which is a byproduct of how we use buildings. The only other one, I know we do have a separate topic, Mark, on transport as well, but this is more just a general question for the group now that we've got a little bit of time. Do we see users transiting more to electric vehicles and wanting to have more charging points on campus? I know KECs have a research piece underway where we are putting in some charging points over near KECs. But that's sort of more of a general interest one. I know, Ken, you're very passionate about in this space as well. So that's probably more a question back to the group.
I think there's no question that that's the direction things are going. The question is around timelines, but electric vehicles are growing in sales while ICEs are decreasing in sales. So there's an open question as to, in somewhere like Canberra, how much do people need to charge at work versus should they just be charging at home?
Yeah.
And so ANU probably needs to have a bit of a think about how that fits within its cost emissions reduction philosophy. But given that the ACT's administratively 100% renewables, whether somebody's charging at work versus whether they're charging at home, I don't think really makes any difference to their emissions profile. But there will definitely be, over the next decade, a major transition towards electric vehicles in terms of the transport that's coming onto this campus.
Again, out of the hailstorm, we had our campus traveller bus damaged significantly by the hail, and we are actually just getting the quotes in now to have our bus replaced with an electric bus as well. So that's sort of the very small baby step we can take, and then if we can place more of the charging points around campus over the coming years as well.
And we should be looking, I mean, this is going to be a separate transport session, but we should be looking at our share vehicles.
Yes.
Yep. So on that note, I've heard recently that there are consortia at the moment that are putting together packages, potentially something that we could talk about as being a salary sacrifice package the same way that we do, or did do, I guess, with vehicles. And the way this works, I understand, it came out of a discussion we had at an Energy Change Institute event recently, is that this consortium buys a whole bunch of second-hand electric vehicles from Japan, which I think we're allowed to do because we don't make them in Australia, so that's all good. They then repurpose them appropriately, register them appropriately for Australian circumstances. They may even do something about battery replacement, I'm not sure. And then they have this arrangement where they have, they can either be leased or purchased outright, I believe, and they have arrangements whereby if you lease them, they give you access, a bit like, you know, the old Caltex card type system for your car, to charging sites around the country. So we might want to think about doing this as a way of getting ahead of the curve, of promoting the idea of electric vehicle usage for individuals, thinking about salary sacrificing arrangements where this can work, but even more importantly, I think replacing our existing arrangements where we have petrol-driven go-get vehicles and seeing whether we can do this with electric vehicles instead. So I think that's a real opportunity for the university to get ahead of the curve and to provide leadership for its staff members in the electric vehicle space.
Thanks, Ken. And I'm sure this will come up again in the travel and transport session. We've got...
I just want to make...
Igor,
if it's possible to make a brief comment on that. So electric vehicles, of course, a great thing, but we also need to encourage people to use electric bikes. And the major obstacle in using electric bikes is security issue. You cannot just leave it on the street because it can be stolen. So if we can think, I think if we can resolve this issue of security of parking electric bikes, we will have great uptake of electric bikes within ANU and we will substantially reduce our emissions. So probably we need to think about safe and secure parking stations for bikes around the campus.
Thanks, Igor, for that. And I know personally people who their electric bikes have been stolen, so they're a bit of a target for thieves. So, so are there any other additional comments or people? Because we just need to wrap up anyway, but just if there's anything brief. Okie doke. Well, just to remind people, two things. One is that there's 6 other workshops in this series, which cover different topics in the same sort of format that we've just had today. Including one which the Vice Chancellor is at, which is on leadership and which we anticipate dealing with, particularly with targets. So the next one is on Friday, and so and that's on behavioural change. So encourage people to come along to that, and just reminding everyone that they can put ideas down on the Idea Note platform. So there's links there. There's a single sign-on called SAML. That's the sort of code for that. So you can just use your ANU sign-on. That's pretty simple to get onto, and it's very easy to navigate. So you just put up your idea, and then you start, just typing your ideas in there, and you can look at other people's suggestions and build on that. So really keen to get everyone to continue to engage in this if possible, just to get your ideas into the system. And then we'll have an evaluation process, which includes people who are on this call, looking at these and combining them and seeing how we can put them into operation. So just again, reinforcing that we're trying our best in the circumstances to actually make this real and make it happen in a significant way and to establish a new leadership in this domain. But this isn't about us winning the race, it's about bringing everyone along with us in the ride. And this is not something that's going to go away. I think we actually do need to show that we are the national university and taking a lead on this. So thanks everyone for participating, and just again on the screen there's the next workshops. Really encourage you to come along and have your say in these as well. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Nicki.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Igor.
Thank you.